Before we left Berlin, the Reichsmarshal had not yet slipped away to the Olserberg. The rank of Reichsmarshal was created specially for Goering after the victory of 1940. The Allies concentrated a series of heavy raids on the Reichsstapel. The weather prophet still has these relapses. For him, Goering was still the Reichsmarschall, and Berlin the Reichsstaffelstück, the imperial capital. One evening, as we were on the way to the Führerbunker, we were obliged to make a dash for civilian air raid shelter because bombs had blocked the street and others were falling in our immediate vicinity. The Reichsmarschall preceded us down the steps and opened the door of the dimly lit vault. You can imagine what the inside of an air raid shelter in the imperial capital looked like at this stage of the war. They stared at him, women, children, and old men, as an operation. But they recovered themselves quickly, as Berliners do. "Here, Herr Reichsmarschall, there's plenty of room," and they squeezed up to make room, evidently honored by the presence of the man who had braggingly proclaimed that enemy bombers would never get through to Berlin, or "My name's Meyer." He sat down between two old ladies, and I can tell you he made quite a picture. Ensconced there in his unbuttoned overcoat with its white silk labels, gold tabs, and outsized epaulets, sporting that unique creation, the Reichsmarshal's cap, it was practically made of gold thread. Grumbling good-naturedly and looking about him with a friendly smile, there was no trace of ill feelings against him. Almost as if he too had been a victim of the unavoidable, they started to complain about the terror raids, and he reacted affably, cracking jokes and cursing their common fate in having to sit out in this cellar. "Things are bad, people, I know, but you must be patient, or depend on it, I'm doing what I can," or "The Anglo-Saxons will pay for this," were some of his empty phrases, but a feeling of almost domestic security had descending on the cellar, and he reviled in it. When the all-clear sounded, they sent him off with handshakes and best wishes, and as we continued on our way to the Führerbunker, he was moved to remark that it was distressing, was it not, to witness what these magnificent people were having to suffer. It is hardly likely to have entered his head, of course, that he, the Reichsmarschall, as commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, was basically to blame. This set Holzamer off again. What had actually been wrong with the Luftwaffe then, and why had we not been in a position to stop the terror raids? What would have happened if we had been given the jet fighters sooner, and they had flown against the bombers? And had Goering really been so utterly dim and incompetent? Question after question, and not all of them I can answer. But now that I have the Count to back me up, I more and more often find myself describing the events of the recent past. Together we have started reliving those air battles over England, over Stalingrad, over Tunis, and yet all of it is therapy against the perplexity with which we face the future. But most of the memories that keep coming back to me have to do with the so-called revolt of the fighter pilots, which was actually no more than a belated, all too belated attempt to change things. Was it a case of too little too late, and why so late? Because a soldier is bound by the law of obedience. I tell myself in reply, and because. One day I decide, as soon as I can use my hands again, I will write it all down. Because when you write something down, it becomes clearer in your mind. Probably I shall never get around to it, because if I ever get to be halfway fit again, I shall have my work cut out, earning mine own and my family's living. No word from Usuller and the children. I met a soldier in June who was going to try and make it through to Saxony, and I gave him a brief message for my parents in Little Pigzig, my mother-in-law in Mecklenburg, and User in Pomerania.